Welcome to the NLP Talks podcast, bringing you inspirational stories along with a good dose of potentially life-changing NLP strategies. I'm Laura Evans, multi-award-winning NLP trainer, and I'm on a mission to help you unleash your potential in business and life. I'm so glad you're here. Pull up a chair, listen in, and let's get started on revealing more about this transformational NLP toolkit. Hey, how you doing? I hope you're really well. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the NLP Talks podcast. I am, of course, Laura Evans, your host, and it gives me great pleasure to bring you the final interview for Series 6. But stay tuned because I'm doing a solo episode just after this one. However, for now, let me reveal that today's guest is Brian Taylor, also known as ISO Guy. Now, Brian Taylor is a consultant and he trained initially in NLP many years ago, but then retrained in NLP with me just 2 years ago during the pandemic. And I asked Brian to come on the podcast to share with you how he's been using NLP as a consultant. Now, Brian's been using ISO and all the other business systems for over 30 years, so he's very experienced and an expert in what he does. But I was interested to understand the difference that NLP had made. He talks in the episode about how the style of NLP I teach is very practical and applicable to what he does. And it's almost like a masterclass in NLP without labeling it as all these different NLP techniques. He just talks about how he's a consultant and how he helps people. But yet if you're NLP trained, you're going to hear NLP dotted throughout everything that he says. And I even make that point to him. He talks about metaphors, reframing, outcome setting, language, conversational change, limiting beliefs, values level thinking, so many NLP techniques in such a short period of time. And I know you're going to love hearing how NLP can make a difference for a professional consultant. In addition to that, we also talk about Brian as a singer, as a hobby of his and the difference that it's made there, and a few other things thrown in for good measure. I know you're going to love this episode. So let's cut across to hear about where Brian originally started NLP and who and what got him into NLP.
Funny story, it was around 92, something like that. And my wife, I wasn't in a great place. I was a bit down and stuff. There was a television program called How to Be Happy with Angus Deaton. And my wife went off and bought me this book. And I wasn't really interested in that, but there was this guy called Tony Robbins in there. And I thought, so I'll have a little look at his tapes. So I bought, they're quite expensive at the time. I just had a child. So I bought the £7.99 version of Unlimited Power.
Yes.
And I just got into it. And then I started reading more and more books about it. And I was listening to a tape one day and it said, basically, make a decision and cut your losses. So I went in and resigned. Thinking, right, I've got to make this work now. So I set up a training company and a consultancy. And the funny thing was that I had somebody call around because we were a training company saying, we're promoting this guy called Tony Robbins. I went, yes. Do you know him? I went, well, yes, sort of. And they offered me, they said, we can't pay you, but if you could promote it, we can give you some merchandise. So I ended up having all the box sets, the proper box sets, being put on the Wealth Mastery course. And that was my introduction to Tony Robbins. Then I realized it's NLP. Of course, I did the fire walk.
Yes.
So we did all this. I just thought it was absolutely fascinating. And I wanted to understand what it was. I found out, obviously, I did know he did NLP. So I decided I want to do NLP. And this is back in 2000 when this happened. And I ended up going on a Master Practitioner course up in London with Paul McKenna and Richard Bandler.
Right, yeah.
Which was really interesting and really informative. Strangely, I didn't have to do my practitioner's course. I just went straight on to the Master Practitioner's course.
Seriously? You didn't do prac? You went straight on to Master?
No, it was explained that the techniques would be used there. And to be honest, it was a great course. I was one of 200 people in an audience,
wow.
And they were on stage. But it sort of gave me information, and it was great. The difference, obviously, zooming back to a couple of years ago when we did the practitioners, then the Master Practitioner course, it's a little bit different when there's quite a number of people, not too many people in a room, and you got Laura looking over your shoulder, and you think, oh, I've got to get this right, because I'm actually doing it. So, though it was, I would say, yes, great course from a practical point of view, to get to use the techniques, and actually somebody saying to you, that's not quite right, and your timing's wrong on your release on your anchor, Brian, and things like that. Yeah,
I'm only doing it to help. I'm only doing it to help.
But no, so yeah, so that was the introduction, and then obviously it was great. I mean, it was during lockdown.
This is the training you then did with me. So when did you train with an NLP with me then? Because that's what, 2 years ago now? 3 years ago?
I did the Master Practitioner. It's all gone so fast.
I know.
Last year, April last year, I did the Master Practitioner. So I was 21. So I did November 20. I did the prac, and then I did the coaching and all that.
Yeah.
And we had all those. It was quite very regulated in terms of the distancing and the hand washing. You constantly take your temperature as I'm walking through the door.
I know. It was like I'm really glad that we did the COVID risk assessment, because it did keep us all safe, because we were all socially distanced, and we did all the temperature checking every day, and we did the hand washing, and we did all that, and it kept us safe and it kept us learning. But I agree with you. It was a lot, wasn't it? On top of learning NLP, you're having to cope with masks and shields, because at one point we were doing masks and shields, weren't we? And it was like, oh my goodness.
It's very, and when you're trying to look at sort of sensory acuity, and somebody's got a mask and a shield on, you're going, I can't really see what's happening. But listen, it was done in such a way that you felt safe, and you got to go out and see people. But yeah, no, that was, but it was really interesting. So, but I think you limited the numbers, especially during the pandemic, because I think there's about 6 of us. Yeah. 7 maybe. So it was very, very well spaced and very limited. So it was great. It felt safe. But again, less people got more learning. It was. I
think you had one of me between 6 of you, or one of you. But yeah, you're right, because our normal class sizes go up to 18. That's what our advertised class sizes are at the moment, and have been for several years, to be honest. I can't see me changing that. But you're right. During the pandemic, we reduced the class size right down to make sure that we weren't all interacting with too many people. And so actually, those of you that did train during the pandemic got an absolute deal, because, if you were one of 200 in London when you did that the first time, and then you were one of 6, I think, because your Master Prac course was towards the end of the pandemic. So
yes, it was a little bit more.
Your Master Prac, I think there was like 12 or 14, if I remember rightly, something like that. So there was more, because that was towards the end. But yeah, it is a very different experience, and you're not the first to say that to me. We've had a number of people over the years that have perhaps done NLP years ago, like you, and have done that. I'm one of 200 people in a room, and it is much more like a conference. Like, you don't get the same level of support, because they can't, because you've got Richard Bandler on stage, and you've got 200 people in front of him. I mean, he can't help 200 people. It's very different. But that's one of the reasons why I decided years ago, when I ran my trainings, I was going to limit the numbers to a level that I knew I could help. And then, as you know, and as yourself, you've been in and helped, like, we bring in people to help as well, even when we do have those numbers. So it is a very, very different experience. I'm just wondering, like, once you had done the training with me, I know one of the things that you've previously talked about, a difference between the large scale one of 200 people versus one of 18, which is what we do. There is a big difference, isn't there, in terms of what you come out of the courses with? And I know you've talked previously about the practical application, like when you came off our courses, because I was able to be of more support to everybody as the lead trainer and get more involved, it meant actually your confidence grew, and you were able to apply everything a bit more. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, because you're not sure if you're doing it right. If you're 1 or 200. And so, don't get it wrong, it was great. But the Richard Bandler, it was like an audience with Richard Bandler, because he was telling you stuff, and it was really interesting. But if you wanted to do, well, I want to use this, and I want to feel confident using this as well, it's nice to have somebody say to you, take a step back. And the other thing is, for those of you who've done the prac and are doing the masters, the pre-work for the masters, the names you were being called. It was ridiculous. So the trouble is, it gave you real good grounding, and you're listening to I was going for walks, and I was listening to tapes, and I was reading the stuff, and I was writing it, and I was looking at it and going, that's not right. And so it was a lot of study prior to it as well, and it really ingrained the practical stuff when you were preparing for the masters, because it was going back and referring. So it was great. So it depended on your learning style as well.
Yeah.
Everything was put into it. So when you come out, you actually feel quite confident about what you're doing. Yeah. So that from that perspective, it was great. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the reasons I was so keen to ask you to come on the podcast, and thank you very much for agreeing to come and hang out with me, is because of the fact that you have been, as you say, for the past 30 years, a consultant. Now, I know that might not be a title you might choose to own, but to me, you're a consultant, with your ISO expertise, which you've been doing for many, many years, as we know, you go into organizations as a kind of consultant and you're helping them to solve problems and you're helping them to put systems in place and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering, having done all your NLP training with me now, and perhaps you could give us all a bit of an insight into, I guess, partly the life of a consultant, but I guess more importantly, what differences have you noticed that NLP has made? Like, how has it helped you to become an even more effective consultant when you're working with organizations?
Okay. I mean, there's a number of aspects of what we covered on the training, some which I did anyway. So things like rapport building. I was always quite good at building rapport, but I understood why I was good at building rapport because you go, oh, right, okay, that's why that works. So obviously, one of the key things, you're trying to build a relationship with somebody perhaps you don't know until you've had the introduction. And to be honest, when you're going for jobs and put yourself forward for jobs, it's like an interview each time, because there's a number of other consultants that are being considered, and so building rapport is key. So people want to get on with you, and they want to work with people they like. So the I think are sometimes underestimated by some consultants. They just go in and go, right, this is what I've got, and they force on them. The other aspect was that also looking at from another perspective, so you could actually see it from their perspective what their issue was. And one of the things I think I mentioned to you that we used to say, you say in NLP, the presenting problem is not the problem. So I started to change the way in which I would approach, go for a proposal. Oh, we want to have this. This is great. And you say, okay, so why do you think you want to have this? And trying to understand exactly what the real root cause was. So an example, I had a company said, oh, we want some problem solving training. I went, great. I'm your man. I used to be a director of the Wales Quality Centre. I used to teach all problem solving techniques. And I said, have you ever done problem solving before? He went, yes, loads of times. I went, okay. I said, I'm a really good trainer, but you've probably gone through the same techniques. I said, why do you think you need a problem solving course? And he said, well, it's the trouble. There's a team not really working well together. They don't communicate well. And I was listening. And that's the other thing that the course reiterated and sort of reminded me that I needed to do was listen to what's being said. They're not talking to each other. They're not working well together. They go, okay. And it turns out that what they needed was a communication and team building course with some problem solving tools to make everybody believe it was a problem solving course. And we ran the course, and we ran it in small chunks, and it was a massive success. But they were very confused. So after the first module, they go, I thought we were doing problem solving. And the second one, I really enjoyed the training, but and it turned out that the actual course we delivered did the job, and they started making improvements, started saving money, and everything they wanted. But they didn't realize it was a team communication issue, not a problem-solving issue. So, yeah, definitely the presenting problem is not always a problem. So that's a really good thing to go in with, because what I find clients tend to do, they go, oh, we need ISO, or we need problem-solving, or they try to give you the solution. And if you want to be good at being a consultant, you need to say, okay, let me try and understand what the root cause is. Because there's no point in me changing the symptoms. There's the cause and effect element we talked about as well. You're telling me about the effect and you're giving me a solution for the effect. We need to go and look what the cause is. So again, it's on the training, we just reiterated that. So that was really good as well.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, when you say, because I mean, if I had £1 for every time I've told people on a practitioner course that the presenting problem is not the real problem. Listen, I'd be retired. I'd be on a Caribbean beach. But you're so right, and I think that's different. I mean, I am not a consultant. I would never profess to be a consultant like you are. That's what you do. I've been on the receiving end of consultants many times in organisations back in my HR days, and MDs of organizations I've worked with would parachute in consultants that would solve the world for us, and and I've been on the receiving end of some some not particularly good consulting, because they do exactly what you said. They come in, they do not take time to understand the business, they do not take time to understand, and they take what the MD told them at face value about this is the problem. And your example of problem solving, oh my goodness, like I remember those days. The MD would go and find a consultant, would come back and then go, right, I found a consultant, he's going to do problem solving with you. And we'd all roll our eyes because we're like, oh, not again. Like we've done this, like what's going to be different, and it's interesting listening to you talk as a consultant coming in going, actually, do you know what? I actually need to challenge some of this stuff when they ask me to work with them and get in. And I remember you telling me that story of the confusion of the delegates, like, well, I thought we were doing problem solving, but actually you've given them what they need rather than what they want, which in the end gave them what they wanted, which is actually the ability to solve problems, but solving problems wasn't the real problem. And I just think it's fascinating to hear how, as a consultant, you unpicked that.
So you're right. I mean, what tends to happen is the CEO or something will go to a conference or they'll see things. I'll get called in, can you do Six Sigma? Well, I can, but do you really need Six Sigma? That's like going down to Halfords and buying a full tool set when you just want a hammer,
Yes.
So it's trying to understand that. But the other thing, again, linking it back to the training, which you do, is what's the outcome you want? You need to understand what is the outcome and what will it look like. How will you know you're there? So what's the success criteria? So it's all the sensory stuff we could talk about. So it's very difficult to go into a man and say, how will you feel? What will it look like? And all that sort of stuff.
I can't see you doing that, Brian.
No. But what you can talk about is how will the system work?
Yes.
What will you have removed? Well, we want to have all this paperwork. And sometimes you're working on a negative. Okay, so if we get rid of the paperwork, because people know what they don't want.
Oh, yes, they do.
So it's trying to say, okay, well, we'll remove all that. So what will be left? And then trying to get them to basically define their outcomes in clear ways. Now, obviously, on the course, we talk about this from a personal development point of view, personal point of view.
Yeah, and us knowing our outcomes and what we want.
Yeah, so I talk it from an organization point of view. How will you know? I mean, there's two things. I'm quite lucky in some respects because there is an external body that audits and evaluates my work. And it says, yes, you've passed, you have a certificate. So I've got it to the standard, but has it made things better? And that's the key thing. So my approach has always been, I'm going to make things better. And by the way, you'll have a standard as well, because you make the change within the organization, which will then help them to move themselves forward and make them more efficient and more effective.
It's interesting, isn't it, that, the parallels actually, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the parallels between obviously the personal development world that NLP sits in and the consulting that you do within organizations, which is very hard-nosed, numbers driven, cost driven, all of those organizations. But the parallels are really actually quite stark because you're absolutely right. On the courses, we talk about know your outcome. We have a whole process, don't we, in NLP that we talk about the keys to achievable outcomes and making sure that we use the principles of success to make sure we deliver those outcomes for ourselves and for our clients. But listening to you talk, I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, there's parallels with that in business. And when people come to NLP sometimes, they'll come to me because they want a certificate. I want to become an NLP practitioner because I want a certificate. And you get a lot of people, and I love them more dearly. And those of our students that listen that know they were a certificate collector will know what I mean by that. And actually, it's not about the piece of paper. It's about what it does for your life and what difference it makes for you. And then listening to you talk, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's exactly the same in business when you're a consultant. Know the outcome and then make sure that people are not chasing the piece of paper to go, well, we're ISO accredited or Six Sigma accredited or all the other systems I know you use, and actually talk about what difference does it make for a business. I'm wondering, when people bring you in as a consultant in their organization and they come to you and say, Brian, I just want to get ISO. Sorry, I get the acronym wrong, ISO. And then you go in and go, but is that actually really what you want? And actually, do you just want the piece of paper or do you actually want the benefit to your bottom line? I bet you come up against some resistance when that happens.
Yes, sometimes. I mean, the majority of people want it because they need it for the tender or they need it for marketing. And I understand that. You've got to be practical on these things because it's allowing you to get access to more work. But what you try to do is to say, okay, but would it be better if we did this? And in fairness, I try to explain to people, I'm coming in with a fresh pair of eyes. It's easy for me to say, well, okay, why are you doing this? Do this, do this. Or, and sort of ask them, well, what's the purpose of this? Oh, we've always done it this way. And they just want to do it faster, but they want a certificate as well. So we just try the question, okay, we'll get the certificate, but do you need to do that? What's the purpose of that? Can we remove that? And we try and streamline. So again, another technique we do, we chunk up.
Yes.
People go down into the detail. And if you look at most people who write their own manuals, and, I'm not saying don't do that, but just if anybody's going to do that, just be careful, because people tend to read the standard, which is really boring, to be honest.
I can imagine. I'm not reading the standards, Brian. You can ISO standards. I can't even say it. Yeah.
And they take a paragraph and they write a document to satisfy that paragraph, and it's all very disjointed. And so what we do is chunk up, say, okay, so what is the high level? And again, what's the high level purpose of this? So what do we need to do that? And let's go down the chunks as and when we need to. We need to get into more detail if it perhaps is complicated or something like that. And then we use different mechanisms to control the process. People who are resistant, they're normally resistant because they want it done quick. In the senior level, you will get people who, oh, I don't want to do this. I've been doing this job for X number of years. Who are you to come in to tell me how to do the job? And again, you've got to listen to people, and you've got to try and say, okay, and again, get their perceptual positioning. You change it. Okay, let's look at it from their point of view. Because if somebody's got a complaint about, oh, they don't want to do things in a certain way, they really believe that that's the right way to do it. So their view of the world is based on experience, values, beliefs, whatever it is, that you need to understand, okay, so why do they feel like that? But it also means that I have to suspend my beliefs as well to say, well, no, you're wrong. I've got to go, okay, well, let's say they're right. Perhaps I'm wrong. Because because I've been doing it for years, I may have got myself into a little rut about the standard, whereas they got themselves into a rut about the way in which they do something. So it's about trying to understand their perspective. And sometimes you go, that's a good point, because they've got a little bit of knowledge that I didn't realize that they needed to do it for legal reasons, perhaps, or whatever. But generally, if I listen to it and I go, no, but I understand you need to do it this way, what I tend to do is sort of try and create a story. So I can either use a metaphor to say, well, this is what I've seen to try and persuade them, or I try to say, okay, create scenarios where the way they want to do it will fail, to try and show them, look, this is where I see the pitfall is. Because just going, you're wrong, you need to do it this way, is no good, because they're not going to get on board. If you can say, okay,
an argument as well.
So, and again, they're the customer. It's not for me to argue with them, because and I said, but my perception is always, or my belief is always, that they honestly believe they're doing it the right way. They're doing it the best with the resources they got available to them.
There's the NLP proposition. I can't even say it. NLP presupposition. I can't get it.
With the resources they got available, they believe. So it's my job to provide them with, or point them to additional resources that potentially might make them go, oh, right, I can see from that perspective. Jenny,
this is like a masterclass in applying NLP and consulting. Now, I know that a bunch of our students that and hello, Mark Perkins is with us saying fascinating insight, Brian. And I know that NLP people that have been trained will have just listened to that whole thing you've just said, going, he's mentioned perceptual positions, he's mentioned hierarchy ideas chunking up, he's mentioned using metaphors, he's talked about reframing and all of that. But the reason I love you so much, Brian, is because what you have done is taken NLP concepts and you use them without even knowing you're using them. And I know sometimes you probably do deliberately use them, but you just so elegantly, talk about all of this stuff you do as a consultant. And I know you've been doing this for 30 odd years. I know you know all of this stuff, technically like the back of your hand. But there's a big difference, I think, between how you approach consulting and how maybe some of the other consultants approach consulting. And I just think it's fascinating. Even simple NLP concepts like hierarchy of ideas is, which if people are listening to this podcast and haven't heard about, is essentially where we learn how to chunk up and down problems. We learn to chunk up and down our language. And as Brian has quite rightly said, lots of people get overwhelmed by the detail. So Brian's there very casually and he's talking about consulting and I'm chunk it up for them. And I do the high level so they don't become overwhelmed by the detail. And I go into the detail when I need to because of what we need to. I just think Brian is just amazing. I'm just listening to you going, yeah, I'm ticking off the NLP things in my head. And I know you say you don't use NLP techniques, but actually there's so many things. I mean, you even just talked about one of the presuppositions of NLP. I'm just like, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going in somewhere, doesn't it?
Well, clearly, I clearly did my job when you were in the training room. So influencing, I just want to talk a bit about influencing, because influencing is, of course, such a key part, I'm sure, for you as being a consultant, because you can go in, as you've already explained, you're aware of what's going on and you challenge and you do, but there's quite a lot of influencing, like the person example you just gave of someone that's always done it that way for maybe for them 30 years and they think they're right and they think you're wrong. So you mentioned there that you're influencing through metaphors and telling stories and using some of your language skills. I just wonder if you could just explain a bit more about that, because I think so many people would be interested in, like, Brian, how exactly do you use metaphors to influence people, to change their model of the world, to change the way they look at things? And I know you use reframing quite a lot to influence people as well. I just wonder if you could just say a little bit more about that for us.
Yeah, so it's not as complex metaphors as we were writing in the class, but generally you can have a look at a direct sort of comparison to a company similar to you. So another thing, everybody believes that their processes are different. So what sometimes I do is I tell a story about a company that I know that has, and sometimes it is a real company, but sometimes it's to make a point about how they've used a certain thing and the results that they got because they looked at something slightly different and they did it in a slightly different way. And as you know, the metaphors can be completely different. I could talk stories about if people are struggling with things, so they're struggling to try and get something sorted, or they're because as well as ISO consultants, I do a little bit of dealing with teams and teamwork and things like that. So if they're having a problem, I might tell a story about me playing the guitar. I tell a story about me trying to learn this chord or how difficult it was and then not getting it and they're making a mistake on a stage or whatever and it all going wrong and the fact that nothing happened to me. So trying to get them to realise that you can just try. It doesn't matter if you fail, but it's about putting the effort in and doing the practice prior to it and things like that. Yeah,
there's another one. No failure, only feedback. You've just got another presupposition of NLP in there.
yeah, that's true. So yeah, and that's the thing. So it's normally telling stories about. And the thing I like about using the metaphors, they're conversational.
Yes.
It's not, and I don't want anybody. It was my client thinking I've been telling you a pack of porkies all the time. They are normally true stories. I tried to work it on based on true stories of things that have happened that I know that have happened. Other people, and they may not be directly related, but they all have the same sort of concept about practicing, about don't worry about if it goes wrong. You say there's only feedback and how that don't expect it to go right first time. Because that's the other thing that I love with quality. It's right first time. And that's one of this sort of the statements of quality, 0 defects right first time. It's not going to happen. It's unrealistic expectations. So what you've got to do is work on it to get it right. So practicing and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, my guitar playing or lack of badly is all part of the story sometimes, just to try and get across. It's about trying, about making the effort.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's interesting that you talk about conversational change because as you know, and a lot of our students will know, we talk a lot more about conversational change, don't we, at Master Prac? The practitioner, the way the courses run, if someone's listened to this podcast and they're not aware of how our courses run, so I am accredited by the ABNLP, so the largest governing body globally, and we have 3 steps, if you like. So we start off with everybody at the NLP practitioner level, which is 7 days if you do it in Cardiff or 8 days if you do it online. And then we have a 4-day certified coach course. And then we have the 14-day Master Prac course. And unlike other organizations, you are not going on our Master Prac course unless you've come up through the ranks, because every course builds on the last course. And you're not on your own. And we do get inquiries. People say, I just want to do Master Prac. And I'm sorry, you can't, because you have to know the knowledge at this level to be able to do the next level, to be able to do master. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper and you're not getting the value out of masters because you haven't done the groundwork before you get there. And so when we explain that to people, they go, all right, okay, yeah, fine. And funnily enough, we had a lady, just the other day who had just finished her master prac. So I was training master prac last week. And she came up to me at the end of the course and she said, you know what? She said, when I first contacted you, I said to you, I just want to do masters. I'm not interested in all the other stuff. I just want to do masters. And she said, and you made me do prac and coach first. You wouldn't let me come on masters. She said, and I was a bit disgruntled at the time, if I'm honest. But she said, now having done the 3 levels and having actually now completed masters, I cannot thank you enough, because I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't have done that personal change journey and gone all the way through. Now, the interesting thing I think for people that are listening is that the NLP practitioner course is quite technique based. And the techniques are what get NLP a lot of attention. You know, we can get rid of phobias in 20 minutes and we can get rid of limiting beliefs in 12 minutes. And people go, oh, wow, that's amazing. I want a bit of that. And people come. And it was interesting because just the last 2 days, I've been delivering our diploma in NLP coaching online. So that's our introductory level. And one of the women on that course turned around and said to me in one of the breaks, she was like, Laura, I'm a bit disappointed because I was expecting to learn more techniques. And I said, well, if that's what you're expecting, I just need to remind you that there's 2 elements to this NLP toolkit. There are the techniques, your belief changes, your swish patterns, your fast phobia models. There is all of that stuff. But equally, in my opinion, as important is the language and the conversational change stuff. And she then understood because the course went on. So we did a lot of language stuff on day 1, and then we did a bunch of techniques on day 2. So she got what she wanted. But I think it's important to make that point to people that they think that NLP is just a bunch of techniques. Mm-hmm. And if people think it's a bunch of techniques, they have missed out on a significant amount of value. I mean, listening to you talk, Brian, right, you've just talked all about how you are helping people as a consultant, and you haven't mentioned a technique once, as in a switch pattern or a belief change, and you haven't. But look at the value that your training is giving you. I just think it's an important point.
Could you imagine me going into a CEO saying, "Okay, take a deep breath and close your eyes"?
No, I can't. I think you'd think you're off your head.
Yeah, it'd be like, okay, you're back in the room. It's yeah. So, I mean, listen, for me, knowing the techniques is great if I want to do things with friends or colleagues, or if I want to help people with certain things, you know. But, yeah, tools and techniques are not really practical in an environment where you're going into a business environment, and you're not going in to do that sort of thing because they're not expecting that sort of thing. So it's having the understanding about people's version of the world. They generalize, they delete, and the filters they go through, and understand why they're thinking like that. Then applying it to yourself. And I said, suspending my beliefs to go, okay, let's assume they're right. Let's go on that assumption. So let's get all the information out to back that. There's a little bit of critical thinking, you know. I lecture for the university as well, and we teach critical thinking. And the beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviors is a massive thing. And I've introduced some of the students to the communication model. And that's been really useful. And a lot of people, since I've been on a course, I started talking to students, and I say, okay, so why do you think? And I sort of much more using the languages. Curiosity. Yeah. And there's a husband and wife on the course, and the wife was telling me that they were home, they were doing some work, and her husband says something. She goes, okay, so what do you think you will gain from that? And he just turned around and said, stop brining me. Because I always question, they ask for something, and they got to the stage, they know that when they ask me a question, I'll probably go, okay, that's interesting. So how do you think that would help you? So what do you want to come out of that? Do you think that approach will actually give you your outcome?
Yeah.
No, it's been quite interesting in the lecturing for the universities as well.
Yeah. Oh, no, fascinating. Listen, I could talk to you about how you use NLP in your day-to-day life all day because of the way that you do it. And as I said earlier, I'm just in awe at how you've taken the toolkit. And it's one of the things I always say to people, like, I have a toolkit to give you. Here it is. Now you make of it what you will. You use it in a way that works for you. You see the benefit in the way you see the benefit. And there'll be some bits of the toolkit you like more than others, some bits that add more value to your personal life or your professional life than others. Like, you take of it what you will, because the toolkit's so flexible, it can do that. It can help you, it can help me, it can help all of the hundreds of students that we've trained. I just think it's amazing to hear, because I know, like, when we were talking and you were like, oh, but I'm not sure if I remember all the names of all the techniques. But you don't need to. That's not the point. So the point is that you're using it, and because I always say to people, remember that your unconscious mind is the most powerful part of your mind. And when you're learning and you're training, obviously we craft our courses very carefully to make sure that you learn at a conscious and unconscious level. And just honestly, when you listen back to this episode and you hear what you just said, it's like a masterclass of NLP without stamping lots of NLP labels all over it, and how you're using it. I just love it. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about you, if that's all right, because obviously we can talk all day about ISO and your lecturing at the university and your non-exec roles and all the professional stuff you do. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask a little bit about Brian. Is that all right? Can we do that?
Okay, yes, fine.
Yeah, perfect. So in terms of the courses and obviously how that has helped you, one of the things that a lot of students that come on the courses, regardless of their professional background, struggle with is this idea of self-worth and this idea of valuing themselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, like, for you personally, did that come up for you on your training? And like, what difference, if it did, what difference has it made for you?
We did a section on values levels.
Yeah, values level thinking. Yeah,
that was interesting.
Tell us more.
So basically, as we were going through it, we were trying to work out what values we were before we did any work, and I'm very much level 6, all lose win. I would empathize and I give everything out, and I didn't really value what I was doing. The fact that I've got 30 years worth of experience in doing these things, and I was just being a nice guy. I wanted to be loved and liked and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, I still do, but I realised that I was actually sacrificing myself for clients, for people, and things like that. And we did this thing, and I then worked on the basis of being the sort of values level. I think 5 was my main one, which was the entrepreneur level. Yes. And it's all about win-win. It's not about trying to rip people off or anything like that, but it's about valuing yourself and taking value for what you do. So it has changed. It's changed my business from that perspective, because, I charge what I feel I'm worth. I think I still charge a little bit less than I feel I'm worth, I'll be honest, but I'm actually getting a little bit closer to it. And to be honest, it's just like it's helped the business. So I say, okay, well, that's the situation. I'm very driven, very focused on delivering for the customer, but also a reward for me. So it's a win-win situation. Don't get me wrong. So the level sort of 6 community and empathy, and I still have that, but I choose when to use that. So if I'm helping, I volunteer for a number of different things and I help out, and I'm happy to do that, but I've made a conscious choice to do that, and I know that I'm doing that. And, and that's made a difference as well, because rather than drifting, and then my level 6 will come into my business work, and it's all like, oh, well, I'll make sure. And to be honest, you don't give time for yourself. So I've spent more time giving myself time. I mean, so this morning I got up and I went down Barry Island and I had a coffee at Marco's with my mate before I started work. Rather than going, I've got to be on at 9, I've got to start working. So I had a call at 10:30, and then we're jumping on for this. I do sort of value my personal time as well.
Yes. And I think I think you raise a really important point. And actually, I don't think many of our other students have talked massively about values level thinking. And I think it's one of the big things that shifts for a lot of people on Master Prac is this idea of what is your predominant thinking level and where do you go under stress? And like your good, lovely self, there are lots of students that come onto our Master Prac courses that have lots of what we call values level 6. So just to give a little bit more detail around what Brian's very eloquently already explained, values level 6 is all about sacrificing self for the benefit of others. So level 6 people put themselves at the bottom of the to-do list. They don't prioritize themselves. They're very good at, as Brian says, empathy and relating to other people's experiences. We often will describe as values level 6 as hurting for the world, which sounds like a bit of an odd phrase. But what I mean by that is they'll see things on the telly or they'll see other people's situations and they'll really feel for them, and imagine what it would be like if they were there. And the problem is, when you sacrifice yourself for the benefit of everyone else, then you end up not feeling fulfilled. Because, people with a lot of values level 6, in my experience, this isn't official NLP training, but in my experience, are very good at people pleasing because they want to be accepted, they want to fit in, and they want to keep everybody else happy. And we had a lady on the Master Prac course last week that I said to her, do you know what? Let me ask you this question. Do you think that as long as everybody else is happy, that means you're going to be happy? And she just screwed her face up and laughed. She said, I used to think that. And that's someone that's a values level 6 that now realizes they're a values level 6 and all that stuff. And values level 6 is lovely. Values level 6 wants to be a part of the community. They want to be part of something. Lots of values level 6 people give all their money away and they give all their time away for free because they want to help everybody else. It's always about everybody else. It's never about me. And values level 5, which is also what I lead with, as you quite rightly say, Brian, is the entrepreneur. Values level 5 wants win-win. Values level 5 also wants the best of what they can afford. They'll work very, very hard now for rewards now. So they don't work hard now for a pension in 20 years' time, whether or not we'll ever get them. They go, I want to work hard now because I want the benefit now. Values level 5 is quite materialistic, but they can afford to be. And it's interesting listening to you talk because when you say, actually, you still do charitable work, a lot of people think, when we sort out your values level thinking, they go, I don't want to be a cold, heartless person. And I still, volunteering is important to me. And, if it means I'm not going to get to do that anymore, I'm not doing this, it's like, absolutely not. You can do any one of the 7 or 8 levels, depends on which model you look at, if there's 7 or 8, but let's just say 8 for argument's sake. You can do any one of them if you choose to do them. And there's a big difference between leading with 6 and always your default setting being sacrificing yourself, your default setting being giving your time away for free, your default setting being all of that, which means then you don't have any time to make money for yourself because you've given everything away, then you suffer. And values level 5 that goes, actually, I'm going to make some money here because I know I have skills, knowledge, and experience that are worth something. I'm not giving them away for free. I absolutely want to be appropriately compensated, but it's not just about me. It's not selfish. It's not, it's me. It's actually, I want to win and I want you to win too. And then we'll work together. And then when you are values level 5, what it means is you do make your money, you do create the time. And then when you choose to do volunteering, you do so consciously and you can afford to volunteer because you've already made your money. And like what you just said, Brian, is like a masterclass in a level 6 that becomes a level 5 person, because you can still do all your volunteering, but it's when you choose to do it.
It's putting your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah, totally, isn't it? Totally. What another great metaphor. So you can't even help yourself. The metaphors they just roll out. So yeah, I just wanted to ask you about that because I was curious as to how that worked. And for those of you interested in values level thinking, that is something that we train in high level. We do a whole day on Master Prac about values level thinking, and it's absolutely massive. So the other thing I want to ask you about is your singing. So completely non-work related,
right.
Because I know that you are a very talented musician and very talented singer. Yeah, and I know you'll say I'm wrong, and that's not the case. But I've heard you and I've seen you, and that's my opinion, and I'm allowed it.
You're allowed it.
So, absolutely. So I think you're very talented. And I know that for a long time, you've wanted to perform, but perhaps it hasn't been the most easiest thing for you to do. And I'm just wondering, like from a purely kind of personal perspective, could you maybe share with us that journey and how NLP has contributed to how you are now versus how you were before in relation to you being a musician and a singer?
So just to clarify, I play guitar and I sing. I'm not a singer or a guitar player, but I can perform. But what I've been doing for years is to open mics. So at the comfort blanket of, I know I'm only doing 3 songs and somebody else is going to come up. And if I just only want to do 2 songs, I can leg it. And I used to get very nervous, very, very nervous beforehand, which is fine. Nerves are good. But on Friday, I did my first hour and 45-minute gig with nobody following me following nobody else. And it was a little bit of pressure. But in terms from the NLP type perspective, I think a lot of it was about having confidence. But the main one is not worrying what other people think.
Mm.
It was not worrying that, I've got to get this right. It's the end. It's just feedback. It's not failure. That didn't go quite right. And in fairness, a friend of mine, she did a critique. She was, it wasn't perfect, but whose is? None of us doing perfect, but you just went straight through and you glanced on as if nothing had happened. And it's quite interesting because I listened to a podcast and they were talking about, I can't remember the full thing, I think it was spotlight syndrome. If you're up on stage, you assume that everybody's watching you and every single mistake is amplified. And the reality is 10% of the people are watching you, if that. So you don't have to worry about sort of like failing on a massive scale. But, and again, what happens if you do? You know, it really doesn't matter. So I've started to get it in perspective. There are things I need to worry about in life, but hitting the wrong chord or singing the wrong word isn't one of them.
Hallelujah. Absolutely. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? You know, like, you know, when you have a hobby, I guess you'd call it maybe,
Yeah.
you know, for you, and that you enjoy doing, and actually, you know, you have an opportunity to bring people a level of joy. And if there's 50 people in the bar, do you have to bring joy to all 50 people? No, absolutely not. Not, as you quite rightly say, all 50 people are not watching. All 50 people are probably, you know, a lot of them on their phone, chatting about what happened last night on the football, or what's happened at work that week, and all of that. And they've got some beautiful, wonderful background music to have those conversations to. But actually, if there's 50 people in a room and you bring joy to just 5 people, and I'm sure it's a lot more than that, then that's 5 people that got to experience joy that day, that if you didn't get up, wouldn't have maybe have had that. And, you know, and I am a firm believer that if you have the gift, you should share it, because otherwise, you know, there's a lot of people out there that won't get to appreciate that. I mean, I can't play a guitar for love nor money. And, you know, singing, well, yeah, I think I just keep mine for the car when I'm on my own, you know, whack it up really loud and then I can't even hear myself. You know, but I really appreciate good music and other people singing. And I think there are a lot of people that, you know, may be listening to this going, actually, you know, I'm too scared. I'm too scared to even do one song on an open mic, let alone 2 or 3, you know, and would be so apprehensive about doing it. And there you are, having just done your first whole set. Just you, no one before and no one after. I'm wondering, like, what would the old Brian have thought if he'd heard what you'd just said about, you know, I just got up and I just did it, and, you know, it wasn't perfect, but I enjoyed it. And like, I wonder what the old Brian would have thought about that.
Well, my first time I played in public was with my daughter singing, and she's got a beautiful voice. She was 10, and it was a lovely daddy-daughter thing. And I'm getting ready and I'm right, okay, ready to go on stage. And she just put her hand on my hand. She goes, "Don't worry, Dad, it'll be okay." So she was like the calming influence. And, you know, for years I played with her singing, and it was like, it was a bit like the Wizard of Oz, ignore the man behind the curtain. I was just playing because I watch her. So it's taking the attention off me. Yeah, but the thought of going up on my own, oh yeah, it would have petrified me. Yeah. And to be honest, it's the same. But it's one of those things. It's once you do it and you do it and do it and do it. Like, I'm great at training. You know, I'm happy. I can stand up. I can entertain. I can deliver in such a way that it's engaging, and I know I can. But I've been doing it for years. First time I stood up, it was like it was all that. But you do it more and more, and it's like anything. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Yeah, and that's the key thing. It's the practice, you know,
and having the confidence to take the first step,
and also not worrying about the result you get. I was going to say failure then, but not worrying about it's just a result. What you need to do to make it better next time.
Well, they always say, don't they? Every master was once a disaster.
Oh, right, okay.
I can't remember whose saying it is now. It's a famous saying from somewhere. But yeah, every master was once a disaster. I.e., we all started somewhere.
Yeah.
And until you start, you're never going to get better.
Well, the interesting thing, a mate of mine has been doing it for years. He's, you know, phenomenal. And he said, look, if you make a mistake, most people in the room can't even do this. The people in the room that can do this generally go, mate, we've all been there. Crack on, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, Brian, I could sit here and talk to you all day. I honestly could. And I am so grateful that you've given me an hour of your time today, because I know you're super busy and lots going on, and I really appreciate it. If someone is listening today, Brian, and maybe they're looking for some support with ISO or Six Sigma or training or consulting or whatever, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you? Can they find you on LinkedIn or website or something like that?
I'm on LinkedIn, but go to ISOGuy, ISOGUY.com.
ISOGuy.com.
Brian ISOGuy.com. Send me an email.
Wonderful.
I'm more than happy to help anybody if they just got a question, because it is really confusing for people.
Yeah, awesome. Amazing. Right then. So regular listeners of this podcast will know that we always wrap up on a quick fire round. Brian has absolutely no idea what I'm about to ask.
Can I just say, I thought this a bit, people watch I'm a Celebrity, and the celebrities assume they're staying in a hotel, they're going to the jungle for the day.
Yeah.
I thought these questions, I thought you were going to let me know beforehand.
No, absolutely not. No one ever knows what they are. So no one knows what they are. It's always off the cuff. So yeah, I mean, listen, come on, we want to get to know the real Brian. Right then, so here we go. I'm looking at my question list. I'm going to pick some out. Right, so Brian, first question. If you can have coffee with any historical figure, who would you choose?
Bruce Lee.
I love it. Amazing. If you were going to be on a desert island on your own, what's the one thing you take?
My guitar.
Amazing. What's the one thing you wish you'd known before you started your career?
That's a bit of a stub one. I think don't worry about, I suppose it's results, it's not failure. Because I was always worrying about, what if I get it wrong?
Yeah. Okay. Good. Excellent. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give yourself one pearl of wisdom, what would you tell him?
Do it now.
Yeah. I love it. And then the final question, if you could describe your experience of training with us here and me at Unleash Your Potential, if you could describe that in one word or two max, what word would you use to describe it?
Practical.
Amazing. That's it. You survived a quick fire round without even knowing what the questions were going to be. Look at that. So anyway, Brian, it's been awesome talking to you as always. You know I love chatting to you. And thank you so much for your time and sharing how you've been using NLP in your role as a consultant. I know it's going to help a lot of people that are maybe just that bit curious about, if I don't want to do the techniques, actually, what is there here for me, which I think was really, really useful. So I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Now, thank you obviously also to the wonderful listeners that we have to this podcast. Without you listeners tuning in every episode to listen to what my wonderful guests have got to say, there of course would be no podcast. So thank you to everybody all the way around the world who tunes in on a regular basis to listen to us. If you want to find out more about the courses that we offer here at Unleash Your Potential, then please head on over to our website, unleashyourpotential.org.uk, and then you'll find all the details of all the courses that Brian and I have discussed today, the online courses, the on-demand courses. There's many ways to train with me now in NLP, no matter where you are in the world. Now, I will be back with one more episode, which is a bonus episode, which is just going to be me on my own. So if you're interested in hearing me talk, then please do tune in for episode 9. So there we go. And if you enjoy the podcast, please like it, please subscribe, maybe leave us a comment. It means a huge amount to us to know that the podcast is appreciated by those people that listen. So thank you, Brian. Thank you to everybody that's listening. And I will see you back here very shortly with episode 9.